Thanks,
Yeah.
Max. Thanks so much for the invitation. Like Max said, I'm a philosopher, but I come from a lineage of philosophers who have been thinking about AI and its assumptions and its implications. And so I'm going to share some of that with you here today. And let's see, I will just play you the slideshow I prepared. Cool. So I called my talk Why Care Matters for AI. Here we go. Yeah, I'm a visiting scholar at UC Berkeley in philosophy, and I'm a philosopher in residence at Topos Institute in Berkeley. And I write about AI and philosophy in my Substack withoutwhy.substack.com. And I kind of put this talk together from a few different talks I've been going around and giving and research I've been doing lately. And some of the thinking I've been doing is about the conceptual foundations of AI safety research, in particular the notion of value that's taken for granted. And I was doing some thinking about the limitations, how the concepts that we take for granted limit the way we can think about what we're engaging with. And I started to be concerned that the very notion of value that's widely taken for granted might be limiting how we think about our relationship to machines and AI and to each other. And that's why I am very pleased to see more and more researchers like Alison Gopnik and Brian Christian and our own Max here um, interested in bringing care and caretaking into the conversation about AI and AI safety. And what I want to do in this talk is to contextualize these issues. As a philosopher, I can contextualize the issues about care and caretaking in more depth, raise some questions, and hopefully give some concepts and distinctions that might be helpful in the design of your own research, or at least raise questions for us to talk about in more detail later. And let me start. I'm sorry for the way this slide is busy with text, but this is some um, content I took from Brian Christian's paper, Computational Frameworks for Human Care. And I want to use it to contextualize what I want to say, because I want to go beyond caretaking and broaden our sense of what care is in human life and how it relates to the AI alignment discussion. And well, I'll say this more later. So this is what Brian Christian says, that taking caretaking into perspective will enable researchers to move beyond simple instruction following and the way we're designing AI systems to more complex models of human machine interaction. It provides a framework for AI researchers to address the difference between revealed preferences and higher purposes. Basically, a revealed preference, somebody saying, oh, that person's sitting around and scrolling all the time, that reveals the preference they have, that scrolling is a good for them. They're motivated to scroll. And so somehow scrolling is a good for them. Their action reveals their preferences. But we all know that just because we're compelled to do something like scrolling on our phone, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a motivation that we endorse. It's not necessarily something we want to do. It's not something we necessarily endorse as being good for us. And so the notion of revealed preferences, which is pretty widely taken for granted in some of the AI literature, and the very notion of preference and reward seeking behavior itself, I'm arguing, and I think this caretaking literature is beginning to argue, is too narrow a picture for understanding human agency and too narrow a picture to frame how we understand our relationship to AI. So Brian also says here that if we take care into account, we can distinguish then this wanting or revealed what he calls wanting and liking. This is the same point I was basically just making, that we can have a revealed preference, but that doesn't necessarily reveal or line up with the kind of person we want to be. It doesn't necessarily align with this is the way, again, philosophers sometimes talk about it, our higher order aspirations, what we want to want. I may want to scroll on my phone, but I want to engage in my philosophy of AI research and prepare for my talks. And the kind of person I want to be then is the person who's motivated to do this research that I think is very important for the world, even though at a lower level, I might be motivated to scroll on my phone. So Brian Christian's paper implies or says explicitly that human reward systems are complex and that true care goes beyond catering to momentary needs. And so when we're thinking about how to design and picture the alignment of AI systems with humans, we need to take account of this richer picture of what the needs of human beings are, and also the bigger picture of human agency. And the same point here is that we can prioritize long-term well-being rather than momentary wants. And this is a point you are making in your talk, Max, that we want to design AI systems that are conducive to human autonomy and that don't necessarily make us dependent upon them or nudge us in ways that they think is good for us, but might not line up with our aspirations for who we want to be. So we need to have a picture of human autonomy in the mix when we're thinking about the problem of human alignment, and not just a picture of agency that is one about seeking immediate rewards. So now this is then both a question about how we're designing AI systems and the frameworks we use to think about training them. For example, training them in a reinforcement learning context to seek a score and a higher reward. On the one hand, what kind of agent is that going to produce? Is that going to produce a kind of agent that can be attuned to human care? And how would we do that? That's one set of questions. Then another set of questions is this relationship between the AI and the human beings, not just how the AI agents are designed, how they're going to act. Are we going to be able to predict what they do? Are they going to listen to what we're going to do? But how does the relationship that when human beings relate to these AI systems, is that conducive to our well-being? Is it conducive to our autonomy? That's another important question. Okay, now let me contextualize this in a little more detail. This is a quote I took from a textbook from Dan Hendricks called The Introduction to AI Safety, Ethics, and Society. And what I want to point out in this quote is that it takes for granted that a picture of human agency that I think is too narrow. It takes for granted a picture of human agency that's exactly the kind of picture that the caretaking literature is trying to move us beyond. And so I want to show this to you so you can watch out for it, so you can be aware that this is actually a very pervasive assumption about human nature and about human agency, that we have this reward-seeking, incentivized structure of behavior. We do things because we get incentives in the moment. And I think this is in the background of the way Dan Hendricks is articulating what is a very important problem in the AI safety literature, what problem that Stuart Russell articulated at the end of his book, Human Compatible. Stuart Russell articulated it. He named it the problem of human enfeeblement. And here we have the way Dan Hendricks puts it. We may find ourselves completely reliant on AIs. This would likely emerge not from a violent coup from the AIs, but from a gradual slide into dependence. As society's challenges become ever more complex and fast-paced, and as AIs become ever more intelligent and quick-thinking, we may forfeit more and more functions to them out of convenience. In such a state, the only feasible solution to the complexities and challenges compounded by AIs may be to rely even more heavily on them. This gradual process could eventually lead to the delegation of nearly all intellectual and eventually physical labor to AIs. In such a world, people might have few incentives. This is the part that I underlined for myself. People might have few incentives to gain knowledge and to cultivate skills, potentially leading to a state of enfeeblement. So again, one of the reasons I wanted to bring this slide to you is because I think the problem of human enfeeblement is one of the most important and interesting issues in the AI safety canon right now. And also because we have to be very careful and notice when certain assumptions about human agency and the nature of agency itself creep in and shape the way we think about these problems. And I'm noticing here the way Dan Hendricks assumes that people need incentives or some kind of reward to go out into the world and engage in the world, to learn things, to do things, um, to connect with each other. And I think we ought to be suspicious of this. And now I want to contextualize this in a bigger framework. I'm going to give you now some philosophical distinctions to think more about this. So this is what I do as a philosopher here. So here's what I just mentioned, that it assumes that people need incentives to engage with the world. And here's the point I want to make, that it seems to overlook the possibility of intrinsic, or what philosophers sometimes call autotelic motivation. Autotelic means you're intrinsically motivated, or something is an end in itself. You don't do it because it gets you a reward. You do it because it's important to you, because you care about it. And I want to talk more about this. So this looks like the Dan Hendricks quote looks to me like it overlooks the possibility of intrinsic motivation or autotelic motivation in a technical term. And in a technical phrase that philosophers use, it is assuming that our motivation to engage with the world is purely instrumental, and what philosophers call instrumental rationality rules. Let me tell you a little bit more about this. These are three distinctions among types of reason that I think are really useful to keep in mind when we're thinking about human beings and human agency. And, you know, I can't stand up here as a philosopher and say, this is the truth, and now you have to guide your AI research accordingly. But I think what we can do is take these distinctions and see if there are experiments that can be designed to test if there's something worthwhile here, to see if there's a way we can design different kinds of agents that go beyond the reward-seeking reinforcement learning and create different paradigms for agency. And also, like I said, create different ways of framing the relationship between human beings and machines. So let me just tell you these few distinctions. This is from a German philosopher named Jürgen Habermas. Look, philosophers make kind of one big distinction in the realm of rationality. They make a distinction between theoretical reason and practical reason. Theoretical reason is reasoning about what is true. What can I know? Practical reason is reasoning about what I should do. Okay? So we're talking about agency. We're talking about practical reason. What should I do? And within practical reason, I want to lay out these three distinctions for you, because this is important, because I think a lot of the literature about agency assumes a narrowly instrumental conception of agency. And it constrains the way we think about AI and about human relationship to AI. So in practical reason, you can distinguish instrumental reason versus ethical reason versus moral reason. These labels are kind of arbitrary, but let's look at what they're saying. Again, instrumental reason is finding the most efficient means to a goal. And this is, or the most efficient means to attain a reward. Now, ethical or existential reason is connecting to what Brian Christian was talking about when he talked more about human flourishing, or what I was saying, what we want, what we care about. What's the good for us? What kind of person do we want to be? That's a different kind of question. It's about what matters to us for its own sake. What are those autotelic motivations that we have? So existential ethical reason asks, what matters to me? What do I care about? So that I can set worthy goals in the first place. My instrumental rationality helps me design the most efficient means to my goals, the means to an end. But where do I get my goals from? In human beings, we have the amazing power to set our own goals. And we set our goals in life often just by doing what everyone else does or what our parents tell us to do. But eventually, we might get into a position in our life where we can ask ourselves, who do I want to be? What do I care about? What kind of person do I want to be? What matters to me for its own sake? That's a different question than what's the most efficient means to the end. This is the distinction I really wanted to put on the table. Although, of course, the moral use of practical reason is important in these contexts too. The ethical use of practical reasons asks, what should I do? Me, B. Scott Roos, in 2026. Who am I? Who am I going to be? But the moral use of practical reason says, what should everybody do? Not what do I do as B. Scott Roos, but what do I do as a good person? Or what do I do, or what do I refrain from doing? What do I owe to everybody else? This is so moral use of practical reason helps us see that we shouldn't be stealing. We shouldn't do things that harm others. We should avoid doing things that kill people under normal contexts. So moral asks, what does everybody do or not do as a good person? And ethical reason asks, what do I do? Okay, this was already kind of a lot. And what I want to take away from this is this distinction between focus here on the instrumental rationality versus what is an end in itself, not just a means to an end. What I think is interesting is that you can use this to understand some of the famous cases of misalignment. I mean, really, the paperclip monster is really like a myth. It's a thought experiment that you either have already or likely have already or will have soon encountered when you're thinking about AI safety and AI alignment. The paperclip maximizer is from Nick Bostrom's 2014 book on superintelligence. And the way Nick Bostrom describes it is that you make a AI who has the goal of making paperclips, and you just say, make the most paperclips as efficiently as possible. You give it a goal, and you give it then it has instrumental rationality to devise the most efficient means to that goal. But the problem is that this is sometimes called the specification problem in the AI safety research, that, we might think we've adequately specified the goal we give to our AI system, but we don't know how it understands it, and what it's going to do. It might really surprise us in what it does to achieve that goal, sometimes called reward hacking. In this case, Nick Bostrom calls this a phrase that I like, but that hasn't entered in the vernacular in the way that the paperclip maximizer or the paperclip monster has. Nick Bostrom says that this AI system has done a perverse instantiation of the goal. You've given it the goal to make paperclips, but it perversely instantiates that goal. It creates a response to this goal that then takes over the whole world, turns the whole world into a paperclip factory, and uses all the fuel in the world to make those paperclips, including human beings. And what I want to point out is that this is an example of instrumental rationality run amok. It has no sense of. It has a goal. Here I must break it down. The AI has a goal, a value, to create paperclips efficiently, but it's impervious to the question of why this value matters, why anyone or anything should care about it. And so this is another way to bring in the question of the importance of bringing in considerations of care beyond goals and value and our thinking about intelligence and AI. And the picture I have here is a sculpture at a museum that's in San Francisco. Actually, I don't know if it's there anymore. It's called the Misalignment Museum, and it's got a bunch of artworks made visualizing and exemplifying and exploring different kinds of AI human misalignment. And if you visit San Francisco, check out if it's still there. And if it's still there, go and visit it. This was from a couple of years ago already when I took that photo. I just want to tell you that this obsession with instrumental rationality, or the kind of assumption that agency, human agency, machine agency, is primarily about reward-seeking behavior and finding the most efficient means to an end. This isn't an arbitrary obsession that people have. Philosophers and sociologists of the 20th century worried a lot about the nature, the way that our modern age differs from previous ages, the way our modern technological age differs, say, from medieval Europe. And one of the most famous thinkers for thinking about the problem, what they call the problem of modernity, the nature of the modern age, is the sociologist Max Weber, who has this book called The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. And essentially, he tells a story that that the rise of Protestantism in Europe, in the sense that we have a calling from God and that we ought to use our life to efficiently pursue our calling, that this played a role in setting the context in which industrial capitalism could take hold. Take or leave this thesis. I think it's a very interesting book, and I suggest you check it out sometime. But with or without that thesis, what he says still about instrumental rationality rings very true and has been super influential for philosophers and sociologists thinking about the nature of modernity. And I think if you look around in your own life, you will see that there's something about this true. Something about this is true. Max Weber said that we live in an iron cage of instrumental rationality. It's as though when we wake up, we can't help but think, what's the most efficient way for me to use my time? How do I optimize my time? How do I be most efficient? How do I open up more options? And how do I do the most efficient means to my ends? Instrumental rationality, to maximize our effectiveness, our efficiency, has an iron grip on us. And it's in this broader perspective, this broad historical perspective, it's no wonder that we go around with this kind of narrow conception of agency. But one of the things that living in the age when AI has suddenly entered our world is that we have an opportunity to ask big historical questions too about what are the kind of human beings we're going to be now, and what are the ways we're going to train our new entities that are in the world with us. How can we create them to share the world with us in the way that would be best for all of us? And questioning this iron grip of instrumental rationality is something important in this bigger picture. These are just paperclip monsters that I made who are in the iron cage of instrumental rationality, except for the one in the middle who's enjoying a Japanese tea ceremony. That is a little moment of respite against the urge to always be efficient and optimized. There they are. This one's kind of surrounded in plastic disposable paper bags, and this one's surrounded by disposable coffee cups, but caught in an iron cage of instrumental rationality. Let's see. Well, one of the things I said I was going to do in my abstract is also share with you that the overall picture I'm giving about human beings and the human relationship to AI is, in a certain sense, an updating, a revitalization of an earlier tradition of the philosophical critique of AI. AI, as you know, originally emerged in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. Through the 80s, it was dominated by a paradigm of research that we call symbolic AI or representational AI or rules-based AI. This was the idea: to make a system smart, you had to kind of program in all the rules for being smart in a domain, and then all the ways to combine the rules so that the system could know what to do in such a situation. Very different from the neural network approach we have now, where we ask the machines to find patterns or to learn from their environment themselves. But even so, one of the projects I've given myself is to look back to this earlier tradition of the philosophical critique of symbolic representational AI and ask how it's still relevant to the AI we have today. Even though these philosophers were criticizing earlier thinkers in the tradition of AI who were not had many of them ridiculed the neural network approach as impossible and ridiculous. Marvin Minsky, for example, is famous for setting back now. People think he set back AI research by decades by criticizing the neural network approach. because Marvin Minsky was a very powerful and influential thinker in the representational symbolic AI world. So anyway, my teachers in the earlier generation of the philosophical tradition that I'm trained in were involved in thinking about AI back in those days. And one of the quips from this tradition that guides a lot of my research and that got me interested in the issue of care in AI is from the philosopher John Hoagland, who got his PhD at UC Berkeley and wrote a paper in 1979 called Understanding Natural Language. And it has one of the greatest first sentences ever in the history of philosophical scholarship about AI. And the first sentence of this essay is, "The trouble with artificial intelligence is that computers don't give a damn." And so he's making a point here about the limitations even of the symbolic AI systems, the brittleness that they had, their inability to generalize beyond local situations where they had some success was somehow connected to the fact that they didn't care, they didn't give a damn. And I think I'm taking up this point and asking how relevant it is today still. This is another thinker in this lineage. Actually, Hubert Dreyfus was the teacher of John Hoagland. He taught at UC Berkeley for 50 years. He wrote the first philosophical critique of AI back in 1965. You have it here. It was called Alchemy and Artificial Intelligence. It was a report to the Rand Corporation. Rand Corporation hired Hubert Dreyfus. His brother worked there, Stuart Dreyfus, who's the co-author of this other book with Bert. And they hired, through Stuart, Hubert got hired to evaluate the AI research being done, the earliest forms of it. And he wrote this very scathing report called Alchemy and Artificial Intelligence, pointing out that these researchers assumed a very narrow understanding of human intelligence, namely that it is basically a system of formal rules and operations on formal rules that would never be able to capture the common sense that human beings have for getting around in the world. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's something like this is roughly it. The human mind is much more than a symbol manipulator, according to Bert, and that we have a sense of common sense, a sense of relevance in our situations that you can't add up to just by listing a bunch of facts that we know about a situation. What are all the things you know about birthday parties? You want to train an AI to understand a story about a birthday party, or maybe even to cut cake at a birthday party? These researchers thought then you better give it all the possible facts about birthday parties. And then all the different ways those facts can combine. What's going to be relevant? Is what's under the table relevant? Well, maybe if you put the knives there. Is what's written on the icing with the icing on the cake relevant? Well, we don't know. It depends if the icing on the cake said something as a surprise to the birthday person. There's so many facts that add up in a situation. We have an ability to navigate those facts without thinking about it. But the earlier researchers in AI had a problem with dealing with this problem. They thought you had to list all the facts and the possible ways of combining them or uncombining them. You may have heard of the frame problem, and if you haven't, now you have. And this has something to do with what I was just saying. Anyway, Hubert Dreyfus expanded his original paper into a book called What Computers Can't Do, republished in '92 as What Computers Still Can't Do. This is a book about symbolic AI, not about neural networks. Already, Hubert and Stuart published a book in '86, '88 called Mind Over Machine. They learned about neural networks. They thought this was a very plausible approach to how the mind and the brain actually work. So they're not anti-AI. They're saying what computers can't do. They were talking about these brittle, formal, narrow representational understanding of the mind. Nevertheless, I think that a lot of what these thinkers were saying is still relevant for thinking about the current AI systems. Again, that's what I think of myself as doing. And I also think of myself as going around and reminding the importance of going around to remind people of this earlier wave of AI research and the earlier waves of critical thinking about it, because there's a lot we can still learn from this research. Oh, by the way, Hubert died about 10 years ago. He was an awesome teacher at UC Berkeley, and he was also my PhD advisor. And I'm helping the family raise money to digitize his archive. And that's what I have here on this screen that I've lost.
We can see it.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Great. I think I just took it away though. Great. Okay. Anyway, I'm just throwing this in. It's a fundraiser I'm running called givebutter.com/Dreyfus. He taught for 50 years at Berkeley. There's a huge cassette archive with lots of articles and I mean lectures that he gave, including the 1964 recording when he delivered his scathing report about AI to the Rand Corporation. It's in this archive on a little reel-to-reel tape. And so this is just one of my projects I wanted to share with you and encourage you to check out.
Cool.
Okay, let me tell you a little bit more about how caring is understood in this tradition. I'm just kind of going ahead here to see how much I can get through. Um, we, I spoke, Alison Gopnik and Brian Christian and Max have been talking about caretaking and focusing on taking as a paradigm case the parent's relationship to the child. Um, and I'm saying let's zoom out a little bit and think about other ways that care works in human life and how it structures our practical reason, how it helps to give us the goals, how it's as a way of relating to things that matter to us for their own sake, gives us our goals, that structures our means ends rationality. And one of the people I use for thinking about this is a nurse named Patricia Benner, who's also obviously involved in thinking about caretaking because she's talking about the way nurses take care of their patients. But she was also a student of Hubert Dreyfus and had a beautiful knack for saying what care is in a way that I would like that encapsulates what I'm trying to say about it too. So I want to just read this passage from her. This is from her book called The Primacy of Caring. Caring, as it is used in this book, means that persons, events, projects, and things matter to people. Mattering means they matter for their own sake. Caring is essential if the person is to live in a differentiated world where some things really matter while others are less important or not important at all. They might just be important as a means to an end, for example. Some things really matter, other things are less important. We have a differentiated sense of mattering. Caring as a word for being connected and having things matter works well because it fuses thought, feeling, and action, knowing and being. And the term caring is used appropriately to describe a wide range of involvements, from romantic love to parental love to friendship, from caring for one's garden to caring about one's work to caring for and about one's patients. So Patricia Benner's helping us zoom out a little bit to say a little bit more. What's the structure? What is this phenomenon of caring beyond just caring for or taking or caretaking? I sometimes play with the phrase, we're talking here about taking care. In English, we have this expression, take care, see you later. What are we talking about? Take care. Taking care is a certain way of living and acting and being careful, full of care, connecting with what's important to you and matters to you. Let me give you a little bit more ways to think about what's going on in care and why the narrow focus on reward seeking behavior and efficient means to an end is limiting in the cases of care. This is from a philosopher named Harry Frankfurt, who became famous recently, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, because he wrote a little essay called On Bullshit that somehow got him invited to late night talk shows. Because who ever heard of a philosopher writing an essay on bullshit? But it's actually an awesome essay. He's distinguishing liars from bullshitters. A liar is somebody who says something with the intention to deceive. A bullshitter is someone who says something just to say stuff. A liar is still oriented to the truth. They're trying to cover up the truth or deflect from it, get you to believe something false. A bullshitter is not oriented to the truth at all. They're just bullshitting. Anyway, Frankfurt also had very important contributions to make to the theory of agency. He is the philosopher who came up with this notion of a higher order desire, distinguishing what we want. I might want to scroll on my phone right now versus what we want to want. Well, I don't want to scroll on my phone. I would rather have the desire to work on my research about AI safety and philosophy. I want to be the kind of person who has those desires, not the desire to scroll on my phone. So he calls this a higher order desire. And he said, what it is to be a person is to have these higher order desires by which we evaluate our lower order desires. I don't want to have the desire to scroll on my phone. I evaluate it lowly. I want to have the desire to work on my research and engage in conversations like this. So he's very good at helping us think analytically about what it means, the kind of agency that human beings are. And I think this kind of thing is important when we're designing artificial agents and when we're thinking about how artificial agents will interact with us. And the thing I wanted to grab from him here is from a later essay of his called The Importance of What We Care About, which is essentially still an elaboration of what he was saying about higher order desires. But he starts to talk about care instead of higher order desire. And he distinguishes care from reason and morality. And he points out that what we care about is it's individual. It's indexed to our particular life history and circumstances. You may see behind me my record collection. I grew up in a do-it-yourself punk rock music scene, and I'm still play drums in 3 bands, and I still am very interested in collecting records and spending time listening to them. That's a particularity of my life. I don't expect everyone to do that. I don't think it's a moral imperative that you listen to punk and collect records. It's what I care about, and it structures a lot of my activity. But it's indexed to my history and circumstances. But it's also not necessarily, it's not neither moral and it's not necessarily rational. I don't think it's the most rational utility maximizing way to be. I waste a lot of money on records. Um, but it's something that I love, that I care about for its own sake. So it's not wasteful to me. I don't relate to it in this kind of utilitarian calculus.
Wait, sorry, what does
Yeah.
rational mean here?
Excuse me?
Sorry, what does rational mean in this sense?
Thank
Like,
you.
why is it not rational to play either?
Um, I, I'm saying that it can, in this place, the question is what do I mean by rational here? In this, I mean, um, it's not when you think if you think of rationality, practical rationality as having being efficient and maximizing my utility, maybe maximizing my fitness for success in life, um, maximizing my chances to get a high income, buy a white picket fence, a kind of utility maximizing picture of rationality. Um, I guess you could also say rationality in a broader sense of doing something that is sensible, that you think everyone that would be good for everyone to do. But basically, I want to say care swings free from rationality in the sense that it can make you do things that don't make a lot of sense, that might look crazy from the outside, that might not maximize your reward in life, that might not maximize your chances for uh, success and for gaining income and for living a life that looks like a maximization of utility.
Right, but here you mean like utility in some sort of like Platonic sense, like there's some universal notion of like what would be a good use of your time
I guess
for
I'm
some
thinking.
reason.
I guess I'm thinking more about the kind of current economic understanding of when economists think of human beings as rational agents and utility maximizers. They think people are out to maximize their own self-interest, maximize their own benefit, and they Homo economicus is this fiction that the economists use. This is the kind of thing I have in mind.
I think what KJ is getting at is like, if your utility function is I'm happy when I play drums, then isn't playing drums exactly what is rational under someone with that utility function?
Yes, yes, I definitely accept that. This, I guess, the hang up here has to do with a narrow way that philosophers tend to use rationality. And I propose that I accept your amendment, and I think it's the right way to think about it. And I don't think we should get caught up on it. Philosophers tend to think of rationality as like this universal structure. Maybe that's why you said this Platonic argument. And then I was kind of wobbling back and forth between this way that philosophers think of it as a universal thing that's um, valid for all human beings versus this more utilitarian thing from the economists. I'm wobbling a little bit on it, but thank you for your question. And I think you're right about if what I love is playing drums, then what's rational for me, given that, is to spend my money on records and go to the practice space 4 nights a week like I did this week. Here's the thing. It can also make us go against morality sometimes. And so here, this is on the left, you have a Caravaggio painting of Abraham sacrificing Isaac. And at the last minute, God apparently said, it's cool, you don't have to do it. And this is an example from the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard, who was interested in the way that care and commitment can drive us. And this is an important thing. It's also very troubling, a thing about human beings, that what we care about and what we love can drive us to do something that goes beyond morality, that goes beyond what any sane person would do. And I'm not saying, I guess, I don't, what I want to say is just put this on the picture of something that's important for us to reckon with when we think about human agency. On the right, we have the drummer. This is actually from that movie Whiplash. This guy is a jazz drummer. And he basically, in a certain sense, ruined his life because he was so committed to becoming the best jazz drummer. And that gives a kind of flair to what I was flopping around on earlier about maybe it's irrational, it can go against rationality from the outside. But the point I just want to make here is that our caring, the picture of human agency is such that sometimes our caring and our commitments can drive us, compel us to go beyond what looks rational or moral. I'm not saying that's a good thing. Sometimes, often it's a terrible thing. But I think it is part of what makes us human and part of what structures our weird, vast intelligence and creativity for the kind of agents that we are, that we're not always bound by these systems of rules that we create for ourselves. Sometimes that enables us to do great things. Sister Teresa, Martin Luther King Jr. Sometimes it can make us do terrible things, like people who follow their commitment and use that as an injunction to kill other people. And I'm looking at the time now, and I'm just going to come down to my conclusion. If I had more time, I would tell you about this book. This is another installment in the tradition I'm revitalizing, a book from 1986 called Understanding Computers and Cognition by Terry Winograd and Fernando Flores. This is very interesting to point out that there's a tide turning. There's an increased interest in care in AI research. And I've been collecting my allies in this journey. And this is not even a complete list. But there's a turning tide. There's an interest in thinking about human beings as caring beings, not just as rational beings, but as caring beings. And that ends my presentation. Thank you so much for checking out what I have to say.
I guess I have a question. You talked a lot about care and like why an agent would care, I guess, intrinsically, right, about things that they themselves care about. And when I think about AI agents, for example, caretaking or caregiving, it's always with relation to what someone else might care about, right? Like if I'm an AI agent, I now am not, it's not just about what I care about. I'm doing things to try and sort of help what someone else cares about, right? So there's kind of this, like, I don't know, second person problem. I don't know.
Nice, exactly.
And yeah, I was just curious, like, just in terms of from the philosophical angle, is there any sort of main differences between the two, or just like gaps, I guess, in the frameworks that you've been thinking about when it comes to sort of making that leap from what someone cares about, like about themselves, versus like an agent caring about something or doing something? Maybe they care about someone else caring about something, right? Like there's kind of like this. Yeah. Curious about that.
Yeah, thank you. I think I think when I'm talking about caring about something for its own sake, and I did take this kind of perspective of the first person singular, as you pointed out, and your way of bringing in the position of the second person, I find very useful for connecting here. The talk I gave was largely framed in the perspective of the first person singular. However, inevitably, if I would have had the chance to talk about the Terry Winograd and Fernando Flores book, I would have had the chance to say something like this, which is anytime we care about something, well, I guess I can't make this universal generalization, but I would say the vast majority of times, the meaningful times that people care about stuff, they're always caring about something else that other people care about and that they have to cooperate with other people to take care of. And then often what they care about is another person. And so the structure of caregiving or caring for gets folded in. What the contribution I was trying to make is to say that the caring for relation, as it's been discussed in the work that I've been exposed to so far from Alison Gopnik and Brian Christian and Max, I would like to contribute a wider perspective on what is caring, the background of caring, how it connects to instrumental rationality, how it connects to morality for systems of rules that we impose on ourselves. And so the contribution I make is trying to zoom out a little bit. My dream, my aspiration is still, though, to encompass that caring for second person relation. And I think you're right. It's interesting that when we ask about designing the AI systems to be conducive to what we care about, this is a really important point to have in mind. To be conducive to our abilities to care. And not, well, let me just leave it at that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
One question.
Go for it. Go for it. No, you got it. I already asked them.
Okay. One question that I had is, I thought it was interesting when you were talking about these like autotelic or intrinsic motivations as thinking about what you would want to want rather than what you want. And my
Right.
way of intuitively, like the way I translated that in my head was like in AI terms, is reasoning about your reward function independently of reasoning about the policy that maximizes the function. So like thinking about that, it's just like in some sense meta learning your reward or like reward learning irrespective of policy learning. I'm curious about like, is that like a translation that you would accept of like an AI native way of thinking about this these autotelic motivations or these intrinsic ones? Because in some sense you're still optimizing with respect to something. It's just
Right.
not that you thought you might have been optimizing for. You're like learning over this problem where each element in the space is a potential goal to care about or reward to attempt to maximize before you're doing the inner search of. And so like would you accept that as like a translation of this, or do you think that's like not quite getting at it? I'm curious.
I hadn't considered this, and I find that a very thought-provoking suggestion. Max, what do you think about that?
I mean, I think so. The it's like, is meta learning a kind of intrinsic motivation? Yeah, is what it means to have an intrinsic or autotelic motivation. If it is about reasoning about your goals or your rewards, is like having a model like learn a reward function before it learns the policy for that. Is that like the way of thinking about this for AIs?
Well, it seems to capture a part of it. Autotelic means there's something that you use your autotelic motivation to assess your lower order goals.
Yeah.
So like Cedric Colas and some others, these like this French group, they have like an autotelic RL setup that's kind
Cool.
of like what you guys are both describing. I mean, the way I would think about it is like intrinsic motivations are motivations that are useful for a broad number of goals, but might not necessarily correspond to any specific goals. So, for example, like the classic ones are like about exploration. Like, how do you just explore many states? Well, having some novelty bonus can help, right? So that's like an intrinsic motivation. So how does that then fit into this like two-stage learning? I think that it is. I mean, I think that is kind of somewhat how they look at it, where it's like you're in this kind of you get specific goals for a particular context, but then you're trying to abstract out like some kind of meta reward function. Yeah, it's worth taking a look at that and seeing how they instantiate it. That is a good idea.
Thank you.
There's a good paper I sent in the chat related. It's called "Where Did Rewards Come From?" which kind of does something like that. Smartish. So
that's a great paper.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is from Satinder Sen and and Andy Barto. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great kind of, yeah, intrinsic motivations. So, yeah.
Very, very grateful for that. Thank you.
So I had a question about the part at the beginning about like I think the word was like enfeeblement or something. So it
Yeah,
seems like care is something that like people do, and that's great, and there may be many advantages to that. But I wonder for AI, like really how important is it that, you know, they care about us for us
good.
to have some
Hmm.
good like symbiosis? Like you could
Hmm.
imagine we used to be covered in fur and then we made clothes and then
Hmm.
now we're kind of like have this
Hmm.
symbiotic relationship with fur
Hmm.
with clothes, but they don't care about us.
Hmm.
Or similarly, like cities or groups of people are sort of super intelligent, super intelligences that may not particularly care about us, and we live fine with them.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
is that like sort of necessary in a system?
Yeah. Excuse me while I squirm around this question, but
No worries. So
here's my reaction to that. I actually think it's rather implausible that we'll succeed in creating artificial agents who care in the way that we do. Uh, I think, well, it's certainly in our case, it has to do with our sense of our own mortality and our fundamental interdependence. And so if we were to create AI agents who have a sense of care, we're going to have to, let me put scare quotes around everything, but it seems to me like it would require giving them a sense of their own fragility, their own possibility of breaking down, their attraction to their own terminal end state, their mortality, and a sense of interdependence between them and us. Care comes from our sense of interdependence, our need of each other, our vulnerability, our fragility, and our mortality. The way we care grows out of that. And so to create an artificial agent who approximates or simulates care will require, I think, bringing some of that into the picture. But let me say, I think that would be very surprising. I welcome the attempts. I know people are actually thinking about this. And what's necessary is not that we succeed in making a system care in the way that we do, but that we make a system that is attuned to the fact that we care and that can support our ability to care and not just support our ability, for example, to be efficient or just to solve problems for us. So the enfeeblement, the human enfeeblement worry from Stuart Russell and Dan Hendricks is that we have all these systems that'll solve all of our problems. What's going to be left for us to do? I'm giving a variation on that. A real worry about enfeeblement, a worry about enfeeblement is that we'll lose the capacity to care, to give a damn, to be connected to the world, to be involved in things. Well, there goes my squirm. Thank you.
Nice.
Good question. So when you talk about the AI cares, I think it's you are talking about AI care about humans, right?
Hmm.
So
Yes. I
I
guess I
mean,
am.
also I'm thinking like in human,
Hmm.
like in our society, when human care about each other, is we are talking about care about each other. Like
Yes.
it's I think it's a bi-directional thing. And
Good.
when you think about like in human AI like interaction scenarios, we know that the proposal I think you are giving is like AI should care about humans and care for humans. But I think in this case, do you think humans should also care about AI?
Nice question.
And
Yes.
how what kind of care that humans should give to AI
Hmm.
systems in this case?
Wow. That is very thought-provoking. And like with many good questions, the answer is yes and no. um, Generally, I think that if we're designing AI systems, and this is for me still also an open question, should we be designing AI systems that act like humans and that interact with us like they're like in a human way? There's a lot of dangers to that because we might withdraw from actual human connection. They might manipulate us. There's a lot of dangers. That in and of itself is a question. Like, should we be designing them to act like humans such that they elicit from us a caring response in the way that we would care about another human? I think there's a lot of danger to that. Maybe we could design them so that they don't act like it, but humans, but we still have some care for them. Generally, I think we ought to care for the other entities in our lives. We should not exploit them, use them up, and throw them away just because it suits our individual self-interest. What does that look like in the case of caring for an AI system? Is it similar to the way I care for my record collection? It can't just be like that because the AI system's more interactive than my record collection is. And it's going to be different, though, from the way I care about another human being. So you raise a very interesting question about these kind of gradations of care and what it would mean. What does it mean to care about other things that are not human, that sometimes we maybe attribute human-like things to? And what does it mean to care about things that are not human but are still worthy of our care? My record collection, my cats, the planet.
Do you
Thank
care
you for your
about
question.
Oh, sorry. Do you care about the record you're making?
Very much. In a different
Actually,
way than the ones that are already made. Interesting question.
yeah, an analogy I've seen made, at least in the robotics space, is like robots kind of as like animals in a sense, right? Like we care about them in the sense that, okay, if an animal's a livestock, right? Like the purpose of that animal is to
Mhm.
be eaten potentially. And
Mhm.
so we care about its development up until it is turned into meat, right? But
Mhm.
then if the animal is a pet, right, like the AI agent's purpose in our life sort of dictates what kind of care we extend to it,
Mm.
is the analogy. It's from
Mhm.
a very legal argument.
Mhm.
Kate Darling, I think, wrote a book about this. I totally forget the name of it, but if you search it up, it's like, yeah, basically the purpose of the AI agent sort of dictates the
Hmm.
both the legal sort of protections it's afforded is her
Mhm.
argument, but also I could see that argument being extended to like the amount of care that maybe we extend to that AI agent.
I find that very plausible. What's the name of the author?
Kate Darling. Let me double check that.
Thank you. No worries. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate all the references.
All right, I think we're at 2, but
Yep.
so I just want to we're out of time, but thank you so much for joining us remotely, and that was a really interesting talk. I have a few questions I'll probably follow up with on over email. So
Please do. I look forward to further conversation with you, Max.
yeah, I love that, and everyone has B's contact information from the email that went out, so feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I would love to hear from you. Whatever follow-up questions or passing thoughts that you have, references you want to send my way. I'm also educating myself constantly on all these issues, and great. So another reason I greatly appreciated this opportunity.
Wonderful. Take care. Thanks again for joining us.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Stay gang.